What happens when a bookstore owner goes undercover, only to find one of his oldest employees sleeping in a back room because she can't afford rent after her hours were cut. David Linwood is the name behind Linwood Books, a small chain he'd poured his life into. He started with a single, beloved shop built on the simple idea that bookstores should feel like a warm hug. And just recently, that dream had grown, expanded to 6 locations, each meant to carry that same cozy, welcoming spirit. But lately, the pages of David's story were turning dark. The numbers told a grim tale. Sales were mysteriously dipping, not everywhere, but significantly in one particular branch. Worse, complaints were flooding in, not about the books, but about the staff, their hours, their morale. Whispers of mismanagement, even bullying, were making their way back to him. His regional managers offered excuses, painted rosy pictures. But David had a gut feeling, a knot in his stomach that told him the truth was far uglier than budget cuts or quiet seasons. He refused to let his dream crumble because of something unseen, something hidden beneath the surface. He knew he wouldn't find the answers from his office chair. He needed to walk the floors again, not as the owner, but as one of them. He needed to disappear into the background, to see the unvarnished reality. He chose the branch with the worst reports, far enough away that his face, usually only seen in company newsletters, wouldn't be recognized. It was a risk, a leap into the unknown. But David knew, deep down, it was the only way to save the soul of Linwood Books. He had to see, firsthand, what was truly happening before it was too late. To truly see, David had to become invisible. The tailored jackets, the polished look gone, replaced by faded jeans, a nondescript shirt, the kind of clothes that helped him blend into the background. He arrived at the selected branch not as David Linwood, founder, but as Dave, a brand new, part-time hire, ready to stock shelves. Stepping through the door, his first impression was a strange paradox. The store looked fine. The shelves were meticulously organized, the displays neat. On the surface, everything was in its place. But the feeling, it was like the air had been sucked out of the room. There was no buzz, none of the warm energy that defined his other stores. It felt hollow. And then he saw her, tucked away in the history section, a small, stooped figure meticulously straightening paperbacks. She was older, visibly in her 70s, her movements slow but deliberate. This was Eleanor. Her name tag confirmed it. There was a sweetness about her face, lined with years, but her eyes held a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that went beyond a simple long day. She moved with a slight limp David couldn't help but notice. As David pretended to get his bearings, he started to notice the subtle things. The way other employees gave Eleanor a wide berth, the quick, furtive glances, the hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when she came nearby. It wasn't overt cruelty, more like avoidance, as if she carried something that made them uncomfortable. David's gut twisted. He'd only been here minutes, disguised and anonymous, but he already knew his worst fears were likely true. Something was deeply wrong in this store, and the quiet, exhausted woman sorting books seemed to be at the heart of it. The mission had just gotten a lot more complicated. Days turned into a week. Working under the radar, Dave sorted books, helped customers, and most importantly, watched. He heard the casual frustrations of the other staff, the muttered complaints about impossible workloads, the whispers about hours being slashed without warning, making it impossible to make ends meet. The air was thick with resentment and fatigue. But among the voices of complaint, one remained stubbornly silent, Eleanor. David saw her constant, quiet struggle, the way she stifled yawns that seemed to well up from the depth of her being, the slight, involuntary limp she tried to hide as she moved between aisles. He saw her disappear into the tiny break room, sometimes seeming to stay just a little too long, needing those extra moments of rest she clearly wasn't getting anywhere else. And her lunch, always the same, a small thermos, maybe filled with weak, homemade tea using reused bags, and a meager, often stale-looking sandwich. It was the meal of someone trying desperately to save every single penny. The other staff vented, cursed the manager, and dreamed of finding other jobs. Eleanor just worked, quietly, diligently, pushing through her obvious exhaustion without a single word of complaint. It was a stoicism that wasn't admirable, but heartbreaking. It wasn't resilience. It felt like desperation. David's concerns solidified into a cold dread. These weren't just signs of a poorly managed store. They were signs of someone in deep trouble, someone pushed to their absolute limit, right under his nose. And he knew, with chilling certainty, that the truth was far worse than he had imagined. The days of observation had been heavy, but nothing could have prepared David for the night he stayed late. The store was quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies every creak and groan of an old building. The bookstore is closed. Lights are dim or off in most areas, except for a single lamp where David is working, meticulously going through inventory lists. He was working through inventory in a back corner, the late hour a perfect cover for being alone with his thoughts and his suspicions. And then he heard it, a subtle sound, out of place in the stillness. It seemed to come from the back storage room, a space usually only used for overflow stock and neglected returns. It wasn't loud, almost like movement. David froze, every nerve ending suddenly alert. His heart began to pound in his chest. Who will be back there at this hour? David cautiously moves towards the storage room door. He pauses, listens again. More soft sounds. He slowly, quietly, opens the door just a crack. The room is dark, filled with towering stacks of dusty book boxes. A small patch of floor is clearer amongst the clutter. There, nestled on a makeshift bed of flattened cardboard boxes, curled tightly against the chill, was a figure, using a worn coat as a thin blanket. It took him a second, and then the realization hit him like a physical blow. It was Eleanor, curled up, trying to sleep, right here in the cold, dusty back room of his own store. The moment she saw him, her eyes went wide with startled fear. She scrambled slightly, looking utterly mortified like a child caught doing something wrong. Eleanor whispers in a frantic tone, "Oh, please, please don't tell the manager." David's undercover persona cracks. His expression is one of profound shock and a wave of immediate, overwhelming compassion. He kneels down slowly, ignoring her plea about the manager, his voice soft and concerned. "Eleanor, what are you doing here? Why are you sleeping in the back room?" Eleanor's composure breaks. Tears well up in her tired eyes. Her voice is a choked confession, painful to hear. I had nowhere else to go. My landlord, he raised the rent again. And Kyle, he cut my hours. Almost in half. No warning. I couldn't make the rent this month. I didn't want to bother anyone. I just needed somewhere for a few nights until I figured something out. The truth, in that moment, was colder and harder than the concrete floor. His own employee, the kind, hardworking Eleanor, reduced to sleeping on cardboard boxes in a store because of decisions made under his ownership. The tension breaks, replaced by raw, painful emotion. It wasn't just about mismanagement or declining sales. It was about a human being, one of his people, suffering in silence, pushed to the brink of homelessness because of choices made within the walls he'd built. David looked at Eleanor, huddled and vulnerable, and the full, devastating reality of what was happening struck him with staggering force. The days of quiet observation, of biting his tongue and pretending to be Dave, had brought everything into sharp focus. David had seen the mistreatment, the exhaustion, the fear. He'd documented Kyle's callous words and actions, every skipped break, every hour unjustly cut. But seeing Eleanor's despair, the raw vulnerability of her sleeping in the back room, that had pushed him past the breaking point. The truth needed to come out. And the perfect, awful stage was set during the bi-weekly staff meeting. Kyle is speaking, his tone dismissive and harsh. He gestures vaguely or looks pointedly at Eleanor, who is sitting quietly, looking weary. The other staff members avoid eye contact. "All right, listen up. Sales are down, and frankly, some of you aren't pulling your weight. We got people disappearing during shifts, taking too long on breaks." He pauses, letting his gaze sweep over the employees before landing pointedly on Eleanor. "Some people seem to confuse hours with naps. We're a business, not a retirement home. Everyone needs to be contributing, or you're..." A chair scrapes back. David, still in his Dave disguise, stands up slowly, his posture changing, straightening. The staff looked up, surprised at the interruption. Kyle's cruel words, aimed directly at the kind woman David had found sleeping on a cold floor, with a final spark. The tired slump vanished. His eyes, usually guarded, were now fixed directly on Kyle, burning with quiet fury. The disguise, built over weeks, began to unravel. He reached up, pulled off the cap he usually wore, ran a hand over his face, shedding the tired labor persona. His body language became precise, powerful. David speaks, his voice completely different from the meek Dave. It's calm, clear, and rings with undeniable authority that silences the room. Actually, Kyle, she wasn't napping. Every head snaps towards David. Kyle looks utterly bewildered and annoyed by the interruption. David steps forward, his gaze unwavering. She wasn't napping and disappearing during shifts? No, she was sleeping in the back storage room, on cardboard boxes, because you cut her hours so drastically, without notice, that she couldn't afford a rent. And she thought she had nowhere else to go. The air in the room turned to ice. Every employee stared, faces slack with disbelief. They looked at Dave, the quiet new hire, standing tall and speaking with a voice of command. Kyle's face went white, then a ghastly shade of red. He opened his mouth, stammered, a pathetic, broken sound escaping his lips. He knew that voice. He knew that look. David straightens his jacket slightly, makes a small movement that speaks volumes, and quietly, but with devastating finality, he delivered the final blow to "My name isn't Dave. I'm David Linwood, the owner, the founder of Linwood Books, and sleeping in the back room. That wasn't disappearing, Kyle. That was surviving. And you let that happen on my watch." The staff exchange shocked glances, some looking towards Eleanor with a mixture of pity and awe. The tension is electric, the truth is out, and everything is about to change. The air crackled. The carefully constructed lie had exploded, leaving the truth raw and exposed. Kyle, the petty tyrant, was suddenly just a man facing the very power he'd abused. He stammered, attempted to bluster, perhaps even tried to apologize, but the words caught in his throat. David turns his full attention to Kyle. His voice is still calm, but carries the finality of a door slamming shut. "Pack your things. You're fired. Effective immediately. I'll have HR contact you about severance." Kyle's face crumples slightly. He looks around desperately, but no one meets his eye. He seems to shrink in on himself. He turns woodenly and walks out of the room or towards the office, defeated. The staff watch him go, a mix of astonishment and silent vindication on their faces. There was no argument, no negotiation. Kyle was dismissed with the cold, sharp efficiency he himself lacked. He stumbled out, leaving behind a stunned silence. But David wasn't done. His gaze softened slightly as he turned to the rest of the staff, his eyes lingering for a moment on Eleanor, who looked fragile and overwhelmed. David addresses the remaining staff, his voice changing again, firm and authoritative, but now layered with sincerity and clear intent. He looks directly at Eleanor as he speaks about her. "Eleanor, what happened to you should never, ever have happened. Starting now, your full hours are reinstated. Effective immediately. More than that, I wanted to take as much paid time off as you need. To rest, to recover, to find a proper place to live. We'll support you through it." A wave of relief seemed to wash over Eleanor, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Other staff members exchanged looks of relief or quiet approval. But David knew this ran deeper than one employee and one manager. This store, perhaps others, needed more than just a change at the top. It needed systemic repair. He addresses the entire group with a renewed sense of purpose, outlining the bigger picture changes. This isn't just about what happened here. Clearly, our systems failed. My systems failed. So, consider this the start of a company-wide change. There will be a full audit of operations across all 6 branches, starting tomorrow. We will implement better, fairer scheduling practices. There will be mandatory training for all managers, training focused on empathy, on leadership that actually builds people up, not breaks them down. And he pauses, his voice becoming more focused, announcing a key initiative. We will be establishing a dedicated hardship assistance fund for all employees. If you're struggling for any reason, you will have somewhere to turn and support to access without having to suffer in silence or resort to sleeping in the back room. The staff listened, some nodding, some still processing the seismic shift that had just occurred. In mere minutes, the oppressive atmosphere had been shattered, replaced by the shock of the revelation and the promise of a fundamentally different future. The repercussions of David's undercover journey were swift, decisive, and sent a clear message to everyone in the company. Things were about to change, and they would change from the foundation up. After the whirlwind, after the shock, after the swift, necessary action, came the quiet. David knew the real healing wasn't in the pronouncements made in front of the staff, but in the private, unspoken moments. He sought out Eleanor, who still looked stunned and fragile, and brought her back to the very room where she had tried to find solace. Eleanor's eyes are red-rimmed, but the fear from before has lessened, replaced by a mixture of exhaustion, confusion, and dawning relief. David looks at her with profound empathy and regret. They sat together, the founder and the employee, the vast power dynamic momentarily dissolving into shared humanity. There were no more disguises, no more performances. Just two people, grappling with a truth that had been hidden for too long. Eleanor speaks first, her voice trembling, overwhelmed with emotion. She holds a tissue, clenched tightly. Mr. Linwood, David, I don't know what to say. Thank you. For everything. I don't know how you knew. David reaches out, placing a comforting hand gently on the table near hers. His voice is gentle, filled with apology and sincerity. Please, Eleanor, call me David, and you don't need to thank me. I should be thanking you and apologizing. I am so sorry you were put in that position. That my company, the place I built to care for its people, failed you so completely. Eleanor shakes her head slightly, tears tracking down her cheeks. She speaks. It's not just the hours or the help. It's that you saw me, that you cared enough to look, to find out. I felt invisible, like I didn't matter anymore. Just an old lady taking up space. Thank you for making me feel seen again. Her words hit David deeply. He nods, his own eyes glistening slightly. He takes full responsibility. You are absolutely not invisible, Eleanor. You're the history of this store, part of its heart and soul. And the fact that I became so distant, so caught up in numbers and expansion that I didn't see what was happening. That a failure of leadership I won't repeat. Things will change. Not just the rules, but the way we operate, the way we value people. David leans forward slightly, offering her a new path, designed not just to fix her immediate problem, but to restore her dignity and purpose within the company. I don't just want to give you your hours back, Eleanor. I want to give you something more. Your knowledge of books, your quiet dedication, the way you treat people. We need that. How would you feel about becoming a store mentor, working closely with new hires, showing them what the spirit of Linwood Books is supposed to be? Flexible hours, whatever works best for you, of course, and with a raise that reflects the true value you bring. Eleanor reacts with a pure, unadulterated surprise, then a slow, radiant smile breaking through her tears. It's more than a job offer. It's an offer of purpose, respect, and belonging. The surprise on her face was beautiful. A mentor? A position of respect built around her quiet strength and experience? It wasn't just about a paycheck. It was about restoring her dignity, giving her a place of honor within the company she had served so faithfully, even when it failed her. David and Eleanor share a look of mutual understanding and respect. In that quiet room, surrounded by the echoes of past struggles, a new chapter began. Not just for Eleanor, but for David and the very soul of Linwood Books. It was a simple conversation, a moment of human connection, but it held the weight of everything broken being put back together, piece by careful piece. The revelation, the confrontation, the quiet, heartfelt conversation. It was a turning point, not just for Eleanor or for that one struggling branch, but for Linwood Books itself. The promises made in the wake of the storm weren't just words. They were a commitment to rebuild. Weeks passed. The shift was palpable. Overtime became manageable. Schedules became fair. The air of tension and exhaustion slowly dissipated, replaced by a genuine sense of purpose and camaraderie. Eleanor, no longer sleeping on old book boxes, found herself in a small, cozy apartment nearby, her full hours reinstated, her new role as store mentor giving her a renewed spring in her step and a spark back in her eyes. And David? He wasn't hiding in his office anymore. He was back in the stores, rotating through all 6 locations, not as an inspector, but as a founder reconnecting with his roots, listening, learning, making sure the changes weren't just policies on paper, but lived realities. New hiring standards focused on empathy, better support systems were put in place. The hardship fund wasn't just announced, it was active, a safety net for everyone. The customers noticed. They felt the shift, the renewed warmth. The bookstores slowly began to feel like that cozy, welcoming place David had always envisioned. It was a painful lesson, learned in the most unexpected and heartbreaking way, but it led to a transformation that saved the heart of the business. So, what's the takeaway from David's journey? From Eleanor's silent struggle? Sometimes, the biggest threats to your success, the deepest problems you face, aren't found in the spreadsheets or the market analysis or the quarterly reports. They're hidden in plain sight, in the quiet exhaustion of the people who show up every day, who are the very foundation of what you've built. This is a reminder, a powerful, emotional truth. The greatest strength of any business, any organization, any community lies in how it cares for its people. Always take care of those who've been taking care of you, because their well-being isn't just a line item, it's everything.